Alpha's life is a testament to silent servitude. For years, she has been the invisible engine of her family home, a Cinderella without a fairy godmother, burdened with every conceivable chore, cooking, cleaning, managing household affairs, and even clandestinely completing her younger siblings' school assignments. Her siblings, Anya and Ben, are among golden children, pampered, irresponsible, and openly indulged by their parents despite their poor academic performance and bratty demeanor. In stark contrast, Alpha's contributions are not only unrecognized but expected, her very existence reduced to that of an unpaid, indispensable servant. Beneath the meticulously crafted veneer of respectability, the family is crumbling. Her parents, obsessed with maintaining a pristine public image in their community, weave a complex web of lies to conceal their mounting debts. Anya and Ben's fabricated academic achievements, and the general dysfunction within their walls. Their reputation, however false, is paramount, and Alpha's tireless efforts ensure their domestic facade remains flawless. A flicker of hope ignites whenever, through sheer intellect and perseverance, earns a full scholarship to a prestigious university, her golden ticket to a future free from her domestic prison. This opportunity, a lifeline to a life of her own, is met not with celebration but with fierce opposition. Her parents, revealing their true selfishness, forbid her from attending, unwilling to lose their convenient, caste-free labor. Their thinly veiled love for her is exposed as conditional, dependent on her continued subservience. This crushing blow serves as Alpha's awakening. The years of neglect, manipulation, and the emotional abuse coalesce into a quiet, burning resolve. She decides, with cold determination, that she will no longer be a victim. Secretly, meticulously, she begins to gather evidence, illicitly recorded conversations exposing her parents' manipulative schemes, forged academic documents that secured her siblings' success, and the damning financial records detailing their hidden debts and the misuse of funds likely from her grandmother's consistent support. The stage is set for a dramatic confrontation during the annual extended family gathering, a meticulously planned event designed to reinforce the family's perfect image, typically held at her affluent grandmother's residence. As the family toasts to their parents' success, Ava steps into the spotlight. With a composure born of years of suppressed anger, she systematically unveils the truth. Each lie, each manipulation, each piece of evidence is laid bare before her shocked grandmother and the wider family. The air thickens with disbelief, then outrage, as the family's carefully constructed world of deceit shatters. The matriarch, her grandmother, a woman of integrity who had unknowingly been subsidizing her children's irresponsible lifestyle, is appalled by the depth of their deception. She immediately declares an end to all financial support for Alpha's parents and the siblings. Instead, she turns her considerable influence and the resources towards Ava, offering to personally fund her education and wholeheartedly support her dreams. Emancipated, Ava makes the profound decision to sever all ties with her manipulative family. She walks away from the oppressive house, leaving behind the unpaid debts and the shattered illusions, and begins a new life. Free from their parasitic grip, Ava thrives in her academic pursuits and builds a future defined by her own choices and achievements. Her story becomes a powerful testament to the fact that true success and happiness are not inherited or given, but earned through courage, self-reliance, and the bravery to choose one's own path, even if it means leaving family behind. The alarm on my phone didn't ring. It vibrated, a dull, rhythmic buzzing against the pine floorboards where he slept on a thin mattress. Jam 4:30 AM. The time was a non-negotiable commandment etched into the bedrock of my existence. If it rose at jam 4:35, the coffee would end be brewed to the precise temperature Fazer-like by the time his feet hit the landing. If it rose at jam 4:40, a pristine, hotel-quality creases in modest linen trousers wouldn't be sharp enough to withstand her scrutiny. He rolled out of the makeshift bed he kept in the small utility room of the kitchen. It wasn't a bedroom, not really. It was a glorified pantry that smelled perpetually of lemon plaid and the fabric softener, but it was the only place in the house where he could close a door and pretend it didn't exist for 6 hours a night. Stepping into the kitchen, the silence of the house felt heavy, like a wet wool blanket. The air was cold, the central heating dialed down to save money, an ironic penny-pinching measure considering the leased Mercedes sitting in the driveway. The kitchen, usually a magazine-ready showpiece of granite and stainless steel, was currently a crime scene of adolescent indulgence. Ben and Anya had been a plate, a half-eaten pizza sat in a greasy cardboard box on the island, the pepperoni congealing into orange discs. Two wine glasses crystal, from the cabinet Mazer forbade anyone to touch, were stained with dregs of red liquid, sitting dangerously close to the edge of the counter. Sticky residue, likely spilled soda or perhaps a mixer for the alcohol they weren't supposed to have, coated the handle of the refrigerator. It didn't sigh. Sighing was a waste of breath, and he needed every ounce of oxygen to fuel the machine. It was the machine, the invisible engine. It moved with practiced efficiency. First, the trash. Every evidence of their late night binge had to vanish before Mother descended at pukul 6 a.m. If she saw the mess, she wouldn't scream at Ben or Anya. She would look at me with those eyes that resembled shattered glass and ask why hadn't they monitored them better, or why the kitchen wasn't ready for the day. The sponge moved in circles against the granite. Scrub, rinse, wipe. My hands were raw, the skin around my cuticles peeling from years of chemical exposure, but he ignored the sting. He loaded the dishwasher, ranging the place with the precision of a Tetris grandmaster to maximize space. By jam 5:15 menit, the kitchen smelled of lavender and the antiseptic. By jam 5:30 menit, the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and the sizzling turkey bacon began to fill the lower level. At pukul 6 sharp, the rhythmic clack of heels on the hardwood stairs announced the arrival of Eleanor. I never called her Mom in my head anymore. Mom implied warmth, safety, a soft place still. Eleanor was a manager, and a demanding one at that. She swept into the kitchen, already fully dressed in a tailor-made suit. Her hair coiffed into an immovable helmet of blonde perfection. She didn't look at me. She looked at the counter surfaces. The orchids, Ava, she sighed, her voice as smooth, low contralto that sounded lovely until you processed the words. She tapped a manicured fingernail against the ceramic pot on the windowsill. They looked thirsty. Did you water them yesterday? Yes, Major. He lied smoothly. He hadn't watered them because he had been busy hand-washing the silk blouse she was currently wearing. He grabbed a small pitcher and he poured a precise amount of water into the silo while she watched. Careful, she snapped, though the water was nowhere near the rim. We're hosting the Hendersons for cocktails on Friday. The house needs to be immaculate. He noticed a scuff mark on the baseboard in the hallway. Sit it. Ew. And did the coffee? He silently poured a cup into her favorite mug, bone white, delicate, and he placed it on a coaster before her. She took a sip, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the quality, searching for a reason to complain. Finding none, she turned her attention to her tablet, scrolling through social media, checking the likes on the photo she posted last night of the four from her father Anya and Ben smiling at a charity gala he hadn't been invited to. He had been at home, ironing the shirts they were wearing in the picture. The stairs groaned under a heavier tread. Richard entered. My father was a man who seemed to be perpetually holding his breath, his face slightly flushed, his eyes darting around as if he expected the ripple to burst through the wainscoting at any moment. Coffee, he grunted, loosening his tie before realizing he hadn't even left for work yet and tightening it again. He placed the mug in his hand. Is the car clean? He asked, not looking at me, but at the reflection of himself in the microwave door. I have a client lunch. Can't have it looking like a dumpster. I detailed the interior last night after you got home. He sighed, my voice flat. And he buffed out the scratch on the bumper. Kid. He took a long swallow of scalding coffee. Ben's grace came in. The portal updated. The air in the kitchen shifted. Eleanor looked up from her tablet. Andy, past history, a minus. Richard let out a breathy laugh of relief. Thank God. If he flunked that dinner street, Jules would have had my head on a platter. Eleanor smiled a genuine, terrifying expression of vanity. He knew he could do it. He's just like you, Richard. He works best under pressure. He turned back to the stove to flip the eggs, staring into the blue flame of the burner. He works best under pressure. Ben hadn't written a single word of that history paper. 3 nights ago, while Ben was playing Call of Duty with his headset on, screaming profanities at strangers on the internet, he had been sitting at a dining room table surrounded by books on the Industrial Revolution. He had synthesized the arguments, drafted the thesis, and he deliberately inserted the minor grammatical errors so the teacher wouldn't be suspicious of the sudden jump in quality. He had forged his voice, dumbed down my own intellect, and he saved his academic life. Again. And Dianya? Eleanor asked. Be in chemistry? Richard sighed, frowning slightly. Could be better, but it keeps her GPA eligible for the sorority track when she applies to state. Another lie. Anya's lab reports were sitting in a hidden folder on my laptop, completed by me between the hours of pukul 1 and pukul 3 a.m. over the last months. They're good kids, Eleanor sighed, content with the fabrication of their lives. We just need to make sure they maintain it. Images everything, Richard. If the community thinks we're sleeping, we're not sleeping, Richard snapped, too quickly. Everything is under control. The floorboards overhead creaked, signaling the awakening of the golden children. 10 minutes later, Anya and Ben stumbled into the kitchen. They were twins, 17 years old, and they possessed a kind of effortless, unearned beauty that made people forgive them for being terrible human beings. Anya, wearing silk pajamas that cost more than my entire wardrobe, slumped onto a bar stool. Ugh, It's too bright in here. Ava, close the blinds. He walked over and tilted the slats shut. I'm starving, Ben announced, ignoring the plate of eggs and the fruit he had already set out. He opened the pantry, shifting boxes around loudly. Do we seriously not have the protein bacilli? The chocolate peanut butter ones? He put them in your gym bag so you wouldn't forget them, he said from the sink, where he was already starting on the pans. Well, I'm not at the gym, Amy, Ben retorted, grabbing a bag of chips instead. God, you're annoying. Ben, don't eat chips for breakfast, Eleanor chided, but her voice lacked any real authority. It was a performance of parenting, not the act itself. Ava made eggs. They're cold, Ben sighed, poking the perfectly cooked scramble with a fork. I can reheat them, he offered, reaching for the plate. Whatever, just make me a smoothie. The green one. But don't put too much kale in it this time. It tasted like grass last week. He took the plate back, scraped the eggs into the bin, a waste that made my stomach clench, and he reached for the blender. As the blades whirred, pulverizing spinach and the apples, he worked them, the four of them, a perfect nuclear family, eating breakfast in a designer kitchen. They were a tableau of success. And he was the prop master, keeping the set from falling over. Ava, Anya sighed through a mouthful of toast. I need you to look at my English lit assignment. The prompt is about the Great Gatsby or something. I don't get it. I have a lot of laundry to do today. Anya, he sighed quietly. Mother's head snapped up. Excuse me. The room went silent. The blender had stopped, and the sudden quiet was deafening. He sighed, he repeated, keeping my voice steady, that he have a significant amount of laundry. The linens, father's shirts. You will help your sister, Eleanor sighed, her voice dropping to the dangerous, icy whisper. We provide you with a roof over your head, Ava. We feed you. We clothe you. The very least you can do is ensure that this family operates smoothly. If Anya needs help with her studies, you help her. Do you understand? Yes, Master. Kid, don't let me hear the tone again. It's ungrateful. Ungrateful. The word bounced around my skull. He was 18 years old. He had graduated high school valedictorian, a fact they had forbidden me from mentioning to the neighbors because it overshadowed Ben's mediocrity 6 months ago. Since then, he had become a ghost in my own home. Actually, Ben mumbled, wiping milk off his chin. I have that sociology project due tomorrow, the one about social stratification. He almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. I haven't started it, Ben continued, looking at me with a smirk that said he knew exactly who was going to start it, and he finished it. I have practice tonight, so Ava will handle it, Richard sighed, checking his watch and standing up. Make sure it's done well, Ava. We can't afford any slip-ups right now. Right, he sighed. I'll handle it. The morning whirlwind departed. Richard to his feeling firm, Eleanor to her charity luncheon, and the twins to the private school, where they sat in classrooms and absorbed nothing. The house settled back into silence, but now it was a demanding silence. The sink was full again. The floor had crumbs. The scuff mark on the baseboard was waiting. He spent the next 4 hours cleaning. He scrubbed the bathrooms with a toothbrush until the grout gleamed white. He vacuumed the heavy Persian rugs in the formal living room, careful to leave perfect, parallel lines in the pile. He ironed 5 of Richard's shorts, using just enough starch to make them crisp but not stiff. At pukul 1 p.m., he allowed myself a break. He ate an apple, one that had a bruise on it, so he hadn't served it to the family, and he sat at a small desk in the utility room. This was my command center. He booted up my laptop, an old, heavy machine that had been a hand-me-down from Richard 5 years ago. It wheezed when it started, the fan struggling to cool the processor. He opened 2 documents. On the left, Anya's prompt for the Great Gatsby. On the right, Ben's sociology project requirements. Social stratification. Analyze the impact of socioeconomic status on life opportunities. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. He looked around my room. The exposed pipes on the ceiling. The shelves stacked with blue paper towels and the detergent. The single bare bulb hanging overhead. He began to type. But he wasn't just typing for Ben. He was channeling my rage into the document. He wrote about the invisible labor of the lower class. He wrote about the exploitation of time and the energy by those who held capital. He used complex sociological theories he had read about in the library books he hid under my mattress. He wrote about the golden child syndrome and the parasitic nature of unearned privilege. It was dangerous. If Ben actually read it, he might realize he was mocking him, but he wouldn't read it. He would print it, staple it, and hand it in. He would get A&A, and he would take no credit, and he would never understand that the paper was a manifesto of his own obsolescence. As he typed, a dead satisfaction settled in my chest. It was the only power he had. They thought they were using me, draining me dry like a battery. They didn't realize that by forcing me to do their work, they were sharpening me. Every essay he wrote for them honed my critical thinking. Every financial statement their fathers he organized taught me forensic accounting. Every crisis he managed made me more adaptable, more resilient. They were creating their own destroyer. He finished pen's paper in 2 hours. It was brilliant. It was scathing. It was done. He switched the anyas. The American dream, illusion vs. reality. He laughed out loud, a harsh sound in the empty room. The universe certainly had a sense of humor. He worked until the light began to fade from the small, high window. My back and my eyes burned, but the work was done. He saved the files to the USB drives they would find on their desks later. Then, he opened a search folder. This one was encrypted. He typed in the password, a string of numbers corresponding to the days of the worst arguments he witnessed between my parents. The folder opened. Inside were audio files, photos of bank statements he had pulled from the shredder bin and he taped back together. Scans of the twins' real report cards before he doctored them for the fridge display. He wasn't just a maid, he was the archivist. He had started collecting 6 months ago, after they refused to sign my FIFSA forms, claiming my potential departure would disrupt the household ecology. That was the day he realized they didn't love me. They loved the service he provided. He uploaded the new sociology paper to the folder, tagging it with today's date. Evidence of academic fraud, Benjamin, grade ke-12. He closed the laptop just as the garage door rumbled open. They were home. The engine revved down. Car doors slammed. Voices, shrill and demanding, drifted through the walls. Ava, Eleanor's voice echoed from the hallway. Why is the front porch light not on? It's dusk. He stood up, smoothing the front of my worn jeans. He checked my face in the reflection of the washing machine door. The expression was neutral, subservient, blank. Coming, Major, he called out. He stepped out of the utility room and he ran to the stage. The invisible engine roared to life, fueled by a secret, burning mixture of patience and hate. He would endure tonight. He would cook the dinner. He would clean the dishes. He would listen to them brag about the grades he earned for them. But he was keeping score, and one day, the bill would come due. The mail slot clattered, a sharp, metallic intrusion into the afternoon silence that hung over the house like a damp shroud. He froze. The silver polish rag hovering over the intricate grooves of the candelabra he had been nursing for the last hour. The sound usually heralded Bill's white, windowed envelopes that made my father's jaw clench and my mother retreat into her migraines, but today, the thud against the hardwood floor sounded heavier, substantial. He set the rag down, wiping my hands on my apron, the fabric rough against my palms. My heart did a traitorous double-time rhythm against my ribs. He walked to the foyer, the scent of lemon oil and the old dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight that pierced the stained glass window above the door. So were the usual suspects: a final notice for the electric bill, a glossy catalog for luxury patio furniture that my mother would browse with longing, and a thick, cream-colored envelope. My breath hitched. The weight of it was undeniable. In the upper left corner, embossed in a rich, navy blue, was the crest of Hawthorne University. For a moment, he didn't dare touch it, as if the material from my fingertips might dissolve the dream into smoke. He looked around, though he knew he was alone. Ben was at soccer practice or claiming TB, and Anya was upstairs, likely sleeping off a stomachache that conveniently struck right before her history essay was due. Mother was out networking at a country club, keeping up appearances. He picked it up. The texture of the paper was expensive, woven cotton that felt like velvet. He slipped into the pantry, the one place in this house where the air felt truly mine, smelling of dried herbs and the cool stone. With trembling fingers, he slid a potting knife under the sill. Dear Miss Thorne, we are pleased to inform you. The words swam. He had to brace myself against the shelving unit, knocking a jar of cinnamon that rattled ominously. Full tuition, room and the board, the Chancellor's Merit Scholarship. He read it 3 times, then a 4th. This wasn't just a letter. It was a key. It was the oxygen mask dropping from the ceiling of a depressurizing plane. It didn't scream. It didn't jump. It simply closed my eyes and he let a single, ragged breath escape, feeling the knot in my stomach, a knot that had been tightening for 18 years loosened just a fraction. He had done it. Between scrubbing floors, balancing the household ledger, and rewriting Ben's plagiarized book reports at 2 in the morning, he had carved out a lifeline. He folded the letter, slipping it into the deep pocket of my skirt, pressing it against my hip like a secret weapon. Tonight, he would tell them tonight. Surely, even in their self-absorption, they would see the logic. A prestigious university, a full ride, a daughter they could brag about without having to lie. Dinner was a production, as always. The roast chicken sat in the center of the table, skin crackling and golden, flanked by roasted root vegetables glazed in honey, a meal that had taken me 3 hours to prepare. The beans are under season, Anya remarked, pushing a green bean round her porcelain plate with the tip of her fork. She didn't look up from her phone, the blue light illuminating her bored expression. They are perfectly fine, Anya. It, my father, Marcus, sighed, though he didn't look at her either. He was staring at the wine glass in his hand, swirling the red liquid with a brooding intensity. Did you speak to the mulligans today, Evelyn? My mother, poised at the other end of the table, dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin. Briefly, they're renovating the guest cottage. Again, he told them we were considering an extension on the sunroom, just to keep the conversation balanced. He sat in my usual spot, the chair nearest the kitchen door, ready to spring up for water refills or drug utensils. The letter in my pocket felt hot, burning through the fabric. I have news, he sighed. The silence that followed was not one of anticipation, but of mild irritation, as if a background appliance had suddenly started making a noise. Can it wait, Ava? Ben groaned, reaching for a second drawer. I'm trying to focus on my carb intake. No more, he sighed, my voice steadier than he felt. It can't. He pulled the envelope out. That green paper seemed to glow against the dark mahogany of the table. He placed it in the center, near the roast chicken, pushing it gently toward my father. He got into Hawthorne, he sighed. Andy received the Chancellor's Scholarship. It covers everything. Tuition, housing, books. It's a full ride. My father paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked at the envelope, then at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. My mother simply froze, her gaze flicking from the letter to my father's face, gauging his reaction before forming her own. Hawthorne, father repeated, the word tasting strange in his mouth. He reached out and he picked up the letter, reading it with the scrutiny of a forensic accountant. Yes, he sighed, a small, tentative smile touching my lips. It started in the fall. I'll move into the dorms in late August. The scratching of silverware stopped. Anya finally looked up from her phone. Wait, you're leaving? That's the plan, he sighed, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Father placed the letter back on the table. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a congratulation. He picked up his wine glass and he took a long, slow sip. No more, he sighed. That word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. He blinked. Excuse me. He sighed. No more, father repeated, setting the glass down with a sharp clink. You are not going. The room seemed to tilt. You don't understand. It's free, Dad. It doesn't cost you as a cent. It's one of the best schools in the country. It costs you as you, Mother interjected, her voice shrill, setting her socialite veneer for something sharper, more desperate. Have you thought about it? Have you thought about anyone but yourself? Myself, he choked out a laugh, a brittle, jagged sound. Mom, I've been running this house since you was 12. I do the cooking, the cleaning, the budgeting. I wrote Anya's entire term paper last week. Andy, who do you think put a roof over your head? Father's voice boomed, rattling the crystal. Who feeds you? Who clothes you? You think you can just walk out on your obligations because you passed a few tests? It's college, Dad. It's normal for children to leave for college. Not when the family is in this state, he hissed, leaning forward. The veins in his neck were prominent. We are in a delicate position, Ava. You know this. The business is stabilizing. Your mother's social standing requires maintenance. We cannot afford hired help right now. We need everyone pulling their weight. Pulling their weight. He stood up, my hands gripping the edge of the table so had my knuckles turned white. I am the only one pulling any weight. Ben is failing math. Anya does nothing but shop with money we don't have. And I am the unpaid maid. Sit down. Father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. Anya smirked, a cruel, satisfied curling of her lip. God, Ava, stop being so dramatic. You're upsetting Mom. He looked at my mother. She was pressing a hand to her forehead, the picture of fragile victimhood. It's true, Ava. We simply can't manage without you right now. Maybe in a few years, when things settle down, you can take some courses at a community college nearby. But leaving, moving away, is abandoned. It's cruel. A few years, he whispered. The horror of it was to offer me cold and gray. They didn't want me to succeed. They didn't care about my potential. To them, he wasn't a daughter. He was an appliance. He was a dishwasher that walked, a vacuum cleaner to breathe. If he left, their house of cards built on my labor, and their lives would collapse. You are forbidding me, he asked, my voice trembling, not with fear, but with a sudden, clarity-inducing rage. We are making a family decision, Father sighed, smoothing his tie, regaining his composure now that he felt he had won. You will decline the offer. You will write them a letter tomorrow stating that due to family circumstances, you cannot attend. And that is the end of it. He picked up his fork and stabbed a piece of potato. Now, sit down and finish your dinner. The chicken is getting cold. He looked at them. He looked at Ben, stuffing his face, indifferent to my future being incinerated. He looked at Anya, scrolling to Instagram, secure in her golden status. I looked at my parents, who wore their selfishness like a crown. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, like a breaking branch. It was a quiet, internal severance. The tether of royalty, frayed by years of neglect, finally parted. I'm not hungry, he said quietly. Ava, Major warned. He said I'm not hungry. He turned and he walked out of the dining room. He heard my father call my name, a command meant to freeze me in place. But he kept walking. He walked through the kitchen, past the pile of dirty pans he was expected to scrub, past the ledger on the counter where he was supposed to juggle the utility bills against the grocery budget. He climbed the stairs to my room, the smallest room, the one that used to be a sewing storage closet. He closed the door and he locked it. He sat on the edge of my narrow bed, the letter still in my pocket. He pulled it out. The paper was crinkled now, marred by the tension of the dinner table. Wait, I'd pleased to inform you. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging, but he refused to let them fall. Crying was for children who believed their parents would come to comfort them. He knew better now. There was no more love downstairs. There was only possession. They didn't love me. They loved the convenience of me. He looked at the mirror on the back of my door. The girl staring back looked tired, pale, worn thin by servitude. But in her eyes, there was something new. A hardness. A flinty spark that hadn't been set an hour ago. They thought they had won. They thought that by saying no more, they could keep me in my cage. They thought he would write the letter of decline, fold my dreams into a small box, and he'd go back to scrubbing their floors until he withered away. He smoothed the letter out on my knee. No more, he whispered to the empty room. He stood up and he went to my desk. He opened the bottom drawer, reaching way to the back, underneath a stack of old socks. My hand closed around the small, cheap voice recorder he had bought years ago for school projects. He checked the batteries. It flickered to life. If they wanted a war, they would get one. But he wouldn't fight with shouting matches at the dinner table. He wouldn't fight with tears or pleading. He would fight with the truth. He thought about the family circumstances my father had mentioned. He thought about the forged report cards he had made for Ben last semester at my mother's insistence. He thought about the grandmother they claimed was dishing to see me, yet whose checks arrived monthly checks he was never allowed to see, but which he suspected were far larger than the grocery budget required. My parents valued their reputation above all else. They valued the lie of their perfection more than the reality of their daughter. He placed the acceptance letter under my mattress. Then, he set the recorder on the desk. He wasn't just going to leave. He was going to burn the key down on my way out. The silence in the house was usually my enemy. For years, silence meant he had failed to anticipate a need, failed to fill the void with surface, or simply failed to disappear effectively enough. But tonight, the silence was my accomplice. He sat on the edge of my mattress, the springs protesting with a quiet squeak that sounded like a gunshot in the stillness of my attic room. The air was stale, thick with the trap heat of the day and the centerfold dust that no more amount of scrubbing could remove from these rafters. My phone lay in my lap, the screen glowing with a harsh, artificial blue light. It wasn't a window to social media or a distraction anymore. It was a weapon. My father's words from the night before still echoed in my skull, bouncing around with violent clarity. We can't spare you, Ava. It's for the family. The grief that had threatened to drown me yesterday had evaporated. In its place, something cold and hard had settled in my chest, heavy as a stone but sharp as obsidian. He wasn't crying. He was planning. He stood up, my bare feet finding the familiar worn grooves in the floorboards. He knew which ones creaked. He knew the rhythm of this house better than the people who owned it. He slipped into the hallway, moving not like a daughter, but like a ghost, a skill they had meticulously taught me. Downstairs, the heavy oak door of my father's study was slightly ajar. A sliver of amber light spilled across the Persian rug in the hallway. He froze, pressing my back against the wainscoting. Stop worrying, Eleanor. My father's voice drifted out, slurred slightly by the nightly scotch. It's handled. It told you. She's not going. It's not Ava I'm worried about, Robert, my mother replied. Her voice was sharp, brittle. You could hear the clink of ice against crystal. It's your mother. She's been asking for the acceptance letter. She wants to frame it for her library, right next to Ben's football trophy. He pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumb hovering over the red record button. He held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, and he extended my hand just past the doorframe. Click! The timer started counting. We'll tell her there was a mix-up. My father sighed, the leather of his chair groaning as he shifted. Or better yet, wait till her Eva got in but decided to take a gap year to help us with the business. Major loves a mortar. She'll think it's noble. And the tuition check she already sent. Consider it a reallocation of assets. He chuckled, a wet, ugly sound. The facelift on the kitchen cast Morgan Way thought, Andy Ben needs a new car if he's going to maintain any social standing at that community college we're pretending is a university. My stomach turned over. It wasn't just that they were stealing my future. They were stealing from my grandmother, the only person in this bloodline who possessed a spine to fund their delusions. I watched the waveform on my screen spike with every word. What if Ava talks? My mother asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Ava? My father scoffed. Ava does what she's told. She's terrified of the world. Without US, she's nothing. She knows that. He pulled the phone back, stopped the recording, and he saved the file as evidence no satu. Without US, she's nothing. The anger didn't flare up. It froze over. He waited 10 minutes, listening to the sounds of them finishing their drinks, the heavy tread of their footsteps climbing the stairs, the closing of their bedroom door. Then, he waited another 20 minutes, just to be sure. When he entered the study, the smell of cigars and the expensive cologne assaulted me. It was a masculine room, designed to project power and the competence, though things my father lacked entirely. He moved to the massive mahogany desk. It was a chaotic mess of papers, a stark contrast to the immaculate home he kept for them outside his walls. My eyes scanned the piles, unpaid bills hidden beneath magazines, late notices stamped in red. But he wasn't looking for their incompetence. He was looking for their fraud. He tried the top drawer, locked. He almost laughed. They were so predictable. He reached under the heavy base of the brass lamp on the corner of the desk. My fingers brushed the cold metal of a small key. They thought they were the masters of this house, but they were merely its inhabitants. He was its curator. He knew where everything was because he was the one who dusted around their secrets. The lock clicked open with a satisfying snap. Inside, tucked beneath a false bottom of innocent-looking file folders, was the ledger. It was an official accounting book my father was too disorganized for, but a black moleskine notebook, where he scribbled his real numbers. He opened it to the current months. The handwriting was erratic. Input, Mother $15,000 tuition support. Output, Mercedes Lee $1,2. Club dues $4,5. Anya wardrobe $3,0. He flipped back a few pages. It was a chronicle of theft. My grandmother had been sending money for years, money for tutors he never had, for camps Anya never attended, for investments that never existed. They were bleeding her dry to paint a layer of gold over their rusting lips. He took photos of every page, my hands steady, the camera's flash disabled. Then, he turned my attention to the filing cabinet in the corner. This was where the academic records were kept. He found Ben's file first. My brother, the golden boy. He pulled out his most recent transcript from the local community college. Introduction to Business, F. Macroeconomics, D. English composition, incomplete. He frowned. Just last week, at dinner, my father had toasted to Ben's making the dean's list. My mother had wept tears of joy. He dug deeper into the file and he found what he was looking for, a piece of high-quality cardstock, the university seal embossed at the top. It was a transcript, but the grades were straight A's. The font was slightly off, the spacing just a millimeter too wide on the course titles. A forgery. A clumsy one, but good enough to fool an elderly woman whose eyesight was failing. He photographed the real transcript next to the fake one. Then came Anya's folder. My sister, the prodigy. Her folder was stuffed with creative writing awards and the certificates of merit. He pulled out a winning essay titled The Center Frame. He remembered writing this. He had written it at pukul 2 a.m. on a Tuesday 3 years ago, while Anya slept off a hangover. She had screamed at me because the first draft wasn't poetic enough. He found the email correspondence printed out behind it. A teacher praising Anya's unique voice. And a reply from my mother, thanking the teacher, attaching a donation for the school's newsletter program. They weren't just taking credit for my work, they were buying the accolades he had earned for her. He gathered it all, the photos, the recordings, the digital scans. He uploaded everything to a cloud account he had created using a VPN on the library computer, a secure vault. The number one in this house had the technological literacy access. He sat in my father's chair for a moment, the leather caught against my legs. He looked around the room, the shelves of unread books, the framed photos of happy family vacations where he was always behind the camera, never in the frame. For the first time, he didn't feel small in this room. He felt lighter just sitting at a bench. A floorboard creaked above me. Ben, likely getting up for water or returning from a night out he wasn't supposed to be on, he moved quickly, replacing the ledger, locking the door, and sliding the key back under the lamp. He smoothed the rug where my feet had disturbed the pile. By the time he slipped out of the study and into the shadows of the kitchen, the house was silent again. He stood by the kitchen island, the marble cool under my fingertips. This was my domain, the place where he chopped vegetables and scrubbed pans until my hands were raw. They looked at this room and saw a service station. He looked at it and he saw a laboratory where he had learned to multitask, to endure, to be invisible. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The upload was complete. He walked to the refrigerator and he opened it, the light spilling out onto the pristine tiles. He stared at the rows of food, expensive cheeses, imported wines, organic produce that would rot if you didn't cook it. It was all after a day. We were broke, morally and financially bankrupt. He took a bottle of sparkling water, cracked the seal, and he took a long sip. The bubbles burned my throat, a sharp, clean sensation. Ava, he didn't jump. He turned slowly. Anya was standing in the doorway, wearing silk pajamas that cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her hair was messy, her eyes bleary. Water, she mumbled, not really asking, just stating a demand. He didn't move to get a glass. He didn't rush to serve her. He just stood there, holding my bottle. The glasses are in the cabinet. Anya, he sighed softly. She blinked, her brain struggling to process the defiance. What? The glasses. In the cabinet. The water is in the fridge. You know where it is. She scowled, confused rather than angry, too tired to mount a full offense. Why are you awake? You have to make scones in the morning. Mom wants them for the bridge club. You know, he sighed. I'm just preparing. You're weird, she muttered, brushing past me to grab a glass herself. She slammed the cabinet door, the sound echoing through the kitchen. Don't burn them this time. You won't, he promised. She shuffled back upstairs, leaving me alone in the dark. He looked at the phone in my hand one last time. Evidence no satu, evidence no dua, evidence no tiga. He wasn't just preparing scones. He was preparing a demolition. He took another sip of water, savoring the silence. It wasn't my enemy anymore. It was the calm before the storm. The gravel of grandmother's driveway crunched beneath the tires of our sedan, a sound that usually signaled the beginning of a long, suffocating evening of invisibility. Today, however, it sounded like a drum roll. My father parked the car next to a line of luxury vehicles that belonged to aunts, uncles, and the various cousins. The engine died, but no more one moved. The air inside the car was thick with the scent of my mother's overpowering flow of perfume and the stale, nervous energy radiating from the front seats. Remember, my mother sighed, twisting in her seat to face us. Her eyes, lined with meticulous precision, darted between Anya, Ben, and finally, reluctantly, me. We are a unit, a successful, cohesive unit. Ben, no more talk of the academic probation, it was a clerical error, understood? Anya mentioned the art gala, not the incident with the venue deposit. Whatever, Ben mumbled, adjusting the collar of a shirt he had ironed for him at 6 that morning. He was playing a game on his phone, his thumb tapping aggressively against the screen. And you, mother's gaze landed on me, hardening into two distinct points of flint. Ava, try to look less severe. You're sure to help grand staff, not to mop in corners. Keep the glasses full, keep the conversation moving away from money, and defer the laugh of God, smile. He tugged the heavy canvas tote bag resting at my feet. Inside, hidden beneath a change of comfortable shoes and a generic writing book, was a manila folder and the USB drive. The weight of it anchored me to the floorboard. You understand, he sighed softly. Kid, let's go. It's showtime. Stepping out of the car, the humid air of late summer wrapped around me. Grant's estate was a sprawling Georgian manor, its red brick facade covered in disciplined ivy that looked as though it had been trimmed with a razor blade. Light poured from the tall windows, casting elongated yellow rectangles onto the manicured lawn. From inside, the muffled sound of classical music and the high-pitched laughter drifted out, a silent song of enforced gaiety. We walked to the front door in a phalanx. My father straightened his tie, rolling his shoulders but he assumed the posture of a solvent, successful businessman. Mother linked her arm through his, tilting her chin up, a practiced smile stretching her lips until they looked painful. Anya and Ben flanked them, transforming instantly from sullen brats to charming prodigies. It trailed 3 steps behind. The shadow, the foyer was a cavern of marble and crystal. A chandelier the size of a small cat hung overhead, reflecting the light into 1,000 blinding prisms. My grandmother, Eleanor, stood near the grand staircase, looking like royalty in deep navy silk. She was holding a champagne flute, listening intently to my Uncle Robert. Master, my father's voice boomed, overly jovial, echoing off the high ceilings. Gran turned, her face softening into genuine warmth. Arthur, and Catherine, you're late. Fashionably, I hope, my mother could, leaning in to kiss Gran's cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. Traffic was a nightmare, but we're here now. I watched them embrace, a tableau of familial affection that made my stomach churn. I knew the bank notices in father's desk drawer. I knew the emails mother had sent begging for extensions on credit cards. I knew that the diamond tennis bracelet on mother's wrist was a high-quality cubic zirconia replica, L'Oreal 1.3 months ago. And my golden ones, Gran sighed, opening her arms to Ben and Anya. Ben, I hear you're considering an internship at that Fermenta City, the one dealing with international trade. Ben didn't even blink. The lie rolled off his tongue with the ease of someone who had been trained since birth to deceive. Yes, Gran, they approached me last week. It's competitive, but I think my portfolio stood out. His portfolio, a collection of plagiarized essays and the group projects where he had contributed nothing but his name. I felt a phantom burn in my fingertips, the memory of typing those very essays until 2 in the morning while he slept. Wonderful, Gran beamed, clapping her hands together. Then, her eyes found me near the door. Ava, come here, child, don't hide in the woodwork. I stepped forward, conscious of my plain gray dress. It wasn't a uniform, technically, but Major ensured my wardrobe remained drab enough to suggest humility, or perhaps a lack of style that required me to stay in the background. Hello, grandmother, I sighed, taking her hand. Her skin was light papery parchment, dry and cool. You look tired, dear, she observed, her brow furrowing slightly. Are you studying too hard? Before he could answer, my mother's hand landed on my shoulder, her fingers digging into the muscle with a bruising grip. She's just focused, Eleanor. You know Ava always has her nose in a book or her head in the clouds. Actually, Ava, didn't you say you wanted to help Maria in the kitchen? They're short-staffed tonight. It wasn't a question. It was a command disguised as a favor. I looked at my grandmother. She was the only person in this room who had ever looked at me with anything resembling respect. Yet she was blind to the vampiric nature of her own son, Andy, his wife. Yes, I lied, my voice steady. I'd love to help. Such a worker, Gran sighed, patting my cheek. Go on then, but save some energy for dinner. I want to hear about your plans for the fall. My parents stiffened. I saw the micro tremor in my father's jaw. They had told everyone he was taking a gap year to help with family matters, spinning my forced servitude as a noble sacrifice. They didn't know he had the scholarship letter scanned and he saved on the drive in my bag. I will, I promised. I retreated to the kitchen, passing through the swinging doors into the chaotic heat of the culinary preparation. The I'd hear smelled of roasting duck, caramelized onions, and distress. Maria, the head housekeeper who had known me since he was a toddler, looked up from a tray of intricate canapes. Miss Ava, she sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. You shouldn't be back here. You're a guest. You know the rules. Maria, I sighed, offering her a sad conspiratorial smile. Mom needs the optics to be perfect. If I'm serving, I'm not talking. If I'm not talking, I can't accidentally mention the second mortgage. Maria's face tightened. She knew more than she let on staff always did. Here, she sighed, handing me a silver tray laden with crystal fruits of sparkling cider and the champagne. If you're going to work, you might as well look busy so she doesn't come in here barking at us. He took the tray and he took a deep breath. He was about to walk back into the lion's den, not as a docker, but as a spy. For the next hour, he drifted through the high-ceilinged rooms like a specter. He offered drinks to aunts who looked through me as they grabbed a glass. He collected discarded napkins from uncles who were already red-faced with drink. And he listened. He circled a cluster of armchairs where my father was holding court with Uncle Robert and a cousin who worked in finance. The market is volatile, sure, my father was saying, swallowing his scotch. But we've diversified. The real estate holdings are solid. In fact, we're looking at acquiring a vacation property in the vineyard next spring. Is that so? Robert asked, impressed. He thought cash flow was tight for everyone this quarter. Tight? My father laughed. A booming, hollow sound. Robert, please, we're thriving. Our situation is sorted. The cars are paid off. We're just being prudent. He gripped a silver tray so had my knuckles turn white. The real estate holdings were non-existent. The house we lived in was levered to the hilt. And the Ava's tuition was zero because they had forbidden me from going. He moved on, fearing that if he stayed, he might throw the tray at his head. Near the fireplace, Anya was holding court with a group of younger cousins. She looked radiant in a dress that cost more than he made in a year of under-the-table tutoring. It's so exhausting, she was saying, tossing her hair. Being the lead in the charity production while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. But Mom says he had a gift for multitasking. Did you really get an A in advanced scout? A cousin asked skeptically. Yeah, Anya scoffed. The professor loves me. He recalled the night she had come into my room, weeping hysterically because she was failing, throwing the textbook at my head and screaming at me to fix it. He had spent 3 nights doing her problem sets, forging her handwriting, ensuring she passed so my parents wouldn't lose face. Every lie was a break in the wall they had built around themselves, a wall he was currently propping up with my silence. Ava, my mother's voice was a hiss. She appeared at my elbow, grabbing my upper arm and steering me into a small alcove near the china cabinet. Her face was flushed, her eyes manic. What are you doing hovering near your father? She whispered harshly. He was collecting empty glasses. I sighed, keeping my face impassive. Well, stop it. You look like a vulture. Go check on the dinner seating. Make sure Granny's at the head, obviously. And put yourself at the end of the children's table. I don't want you sitting next to Dr. Evans. He asks too many questions about colleges. I'm 22, Mother. I don't belong at the children's table. You belong where I tell you to belong. She snapped. She smoothed the front of her dress, her breathing shallow. This night has to be perfect. Granny's making decisions about the trust disbursements next month. If she thinks we're unstable, she cuts the allowance. If she cuts the allowance, we'll lose the house. Do you want to be homeless ever? Is that what you want? It was the same old song, the weaponization of fear. We do this for the family. You sacrifice for us because we keep a roof over your head. No more, Mother, he sighed calmly. I don't want to be homeless. Then do your job. She shoved me lightly toward the dining room and turned back to the party, her face instantly resembling into a mask of delightful charm. He walked into the massive dining room. The table was a masterpiece of mahogany and lace, set for 20. The silver gleamed under the soft lighting. Place cards written in calligraphy sat atop linen napkins. He found my name. It was indeed at the far end of the table, next to my 6-year-old cousin and the kitchen door. He stared at the card. Ava, just the name. No more title, no more honor, just a placeholder. He reached into my pocket and touched the cold plastic of the USB drive. A strange calm settled over me. Usually, this momentarily got onto the shadows. The erasure of my dignity would bring tears to my eyes. It would choke down the humiliation and deserve my time. But tonight, the humiliation didn't sting. It felt like fuel. They thought they were managing me. They thought they were hiding me. They didn't realize they were locking themselves in a room with the demolition expert. Ava, I turned to see my grandmother standing in the doorway. She leaned heavily on her chane, her eyes sweeping over the grand table before landing on me. Is everything alright, my dear? She asked. She moved into the room, the scent of lavender and the oud still trailing her. Everything is beautiful, Gran. I sighed. She came closer, lowering her voice. Your mother says you've decided against university, that you want to focus on domestic arts. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the lady that hurt the most. Gran valued education above all else. She had been one of the first women in her circle to earn a degree in the 50s. Is that what she said? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Gran sighed, looking disappointed. She said you didn't feel ready, that the pressure was too much for you. She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it. Ava, there is no more shame in needing time, but don't let them make you small. You have a brilliant mind. I've seen it in the letters you used to write me. He looked at this woman, the matriarch who held the purse strings but had no more idea she was funding a circus. She loved me, in her way, but she didn't know me. She knew the version of me my parents allowed her to see, the shy, fragile, helpful girl. I could tell her now. I could whisper the truth right here, before the salad course. But it wouldn't be enough. She would confront my father. He would spin a tale of my mental instability. My mother would weep, and the waters would muddy. I needed the evidence. I needed the shake and the I haven't given up, Gran, I sighed, meeting her eyes. I promise. Kid, she sighed firmly. Now, help me with my chair. My hip is acting up. I pulled out the heavy oak chair at the head of the table. As she sat, the rest of the family began to drift in, guided by the dinner bell. The nice level rose chairs scraping, ice clinking, the performative laughter of people who were determined to have a good time. My father took his seat at the upper end, playing the role of the patriarch. My mother sat to his right, vibrating with anxiety. Ben and Anya took prime spots near the center, ready to be adored. He walked to the far end of the table, past the aunts and the uncles, past the cousins. He sat in my exile seat near the swinging kitchen door. Wine, sir, a waiter asked my father. The 98 Cabernet, father announced loudly. Let's celebrate. Tea family. Tea family, the table echoed. He raised my water glass, my eyes locking on my father's beaming face. He looked so secure, so protected by his walls of the seat. He took a sip of water. It was cool and clear. Under the table, he slid my foot over my toe bag, feeling the hard edge of the folder through the canvas. Enjoy the toast, he thought. A cold, dark resolve settling in my chest. It's the last one you'll ever make. The sharp, crystalline ting-ting-ting of a silver dessert spoon tapping against the fruit of vintage champagne sliced through the low hum of conversation. It was the sound of authority, the sound of my father commanding the room, And usually, it was the sound that signaled he needed to refill glasses or clear plates. Tonight, however, it was the starting gun. He stood by the mahogany sideboard, my hands clasped in front of me, blending into the damask wallpaper as he had been trained to do for 2 decades. The dining hall of Grandmother Eleanor's estate was a cavern of old Welsh dark wood paneling, heavy velvet drapes that smelled of dust and lavender, and a chandelier that cast a fractured, glittering light over the extended family. If he could have everyone's attention, my father, Richard announced, rising from his chair. His face was flushed with wine and the intoxication of his own voice. Beside him, my mother, Susan, her hand resting performatively on the shoulder of my brother, Ben. We have so much to be thankful for this year. Our family is our fortress, and the achievements of our children are the bricks that build it. He watched Ben smirk, picking at a loose thread on the cuff of his blazer. He looked bored. Across the table, my sister Anya was surreptitiously texting under the table, her face illuminated by the pale blue glow of her screen. Tianya, father continued, raising his glass higher, the liquid gold catching the light, for her acceptance into the pre-law program, continuing the family legacy. And to Ben, for making the dean's list his very first semester. Susan and he couldn't be prouder of the distinct path they are carving. Here, Uncle Marcus boomed from the end of the table. And Mother added, her voice a practiced trill of modesty, we must thank Grandmother Eleanor for her generosity. It takes a feeling, as they say, to raise such exceptional young adults. Grandmother Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her silver hair carved into an immaculate bun. She looked frail tonight, her skin like parchment, but her eyes were sharp, brimming with pride as she looked at her golden grandchildren. She raised her glass, a loving smile trembling on her lips. To the family, Grandmother whispered. The air in the room felt thick, gelatinous. Every breath he could require effort. My heart was not beating. It was colliding against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of terror and the adrenaline. He looked at a folder resting on the sideboard behind me. It was a simple blade binder, innocuous, invisible, just like me. As the family drank, tilting their head back, he stepped away from the wall. Actually, he sighed. My voice was not loud, but in the reverent silence following the toast, it was a thunderclap. Father froze, the glass halfway to his lips. He blinked, turning his head slowly as if dealing with a mildly irritating insect. Ava, we aren't ready for the dessert course yet. Go back to the kitchen. I'm not getting the dessert, Father, he sighed. My legs felt like they were made of water, but he forced them to carry me toward the head of the table. He moved with the same fluid efficiency he used to serve them, but this time, he wasn't carrying a tray. He was carrying the end of their world. Ava, sit down, Mother hissed, her smile tight and fixed, her eyes darting to the relatives watching us. You're embarrassing yourself. You look tired. I am tired, he agreed, stopping directly to the right of Grandmother Eleanor. He placed the blade binder on the pristine white tablecloth, though Heify thought it made disrupted arrangement of the silverware. I am incredibly tired, but that isn't why I'm interrupting. What is this? Grandmother asked, her voice wavering. She looked from me to the binder, confusion clouding her eyes. Ava, dear, what are you doing? Father just toasted to the truth of this family, he sighed, my voice gaining strength. The trembling in my hands ceased as the cold resolve took over. He opened the binder. He thought it only fair that you see the actual documentation, the bricks of the fortress, as he called them. He pulled out the first document, a transcript printed on official university watermarked paper. Ben isn't on the dean's list, he stated clearly, sliding the paper toward Grandmother. He is currently on academic probation with a GPA of +1,2. If he fails another class, he will be expelled. The report card he emailed you last week, Father, was a Photoshop file. You know, because you watched him edit it. That's a lie, Ben shouted, knocking his chair back as he scrambled up. His face went from bored to be red in a second. She's lying. She's just jealous. Sit down, Ben, he sighed, not even looking at him. He pulled the second set of papers. And Anya isn't in pre-law. She was rejected 3 months ago. He laid the rejection letter on top of Ben's transcript. She has been using the tuition money you sent, Grandmother, to rent an apartment downtown for her boyfriend. She hasn't attended a single class since October. The room descended into a chaotic murmur, and Sarah gasped, covering her mouth. Uncle Marcus frowned, leaning forward to squint at the papers. Ava, Father roared, slamming his fist onto the table. The cutlery jumped. That is enough. You ungrateful, spiteful little get out. Get out of this house. He lunged toward me, but he didn't flinch. He simply reached into my pocket and he pulled out my phone. He had already paired it to the room's Bluetooth sound system, the same system they used to play Mozart during these insufferable dinners. You can yell, Father, he sighed, tapping the screen. But you can't shout over your own voice. He pressed play. The surround sound speakers, usually reserved for violence, cracked live. My father's voice, recorded 3 weeks ago in our kitchen, boomed through the dining hall, magnified and undeniable. Let her go. Are you insane? Susan, do you know how much a full-time housekeeper costs? Aku, an accountant. The recording continued, capturing my mother's shrill reply. But the scholarship, Richard, is a full ride. If she leaves, people will ask questions. Let them ask. Father's recorded voice sneered, the malice dripping from every syllable. We tell her no more. We tell her we can't afford the travel costs, or that we need her here to help with your health issues. Kill her, break her. I don't care. She is the mule that pulls this cart, and I am not about to start paying for labor I can get for free. She stays. End of discussion. The silence that followed the recording was heavier than the one before the toast. It was a suffocating, absolute silence. The guests were paralyzed. My mother had gone pale, her hand clutching her pearls so tightly her knuckles were white. Father looked as though he had been struck in the chest with a sledgehammer. His mouth opened and he closed, but no more sound came out. He looked at grandmother. She was staring at her son, her own flesh and blood, with an expression of dawning horror. Her hand reached out, trembling violently, to touch the transcript he had laid before her. Richard, she whispered. It was a small, broken sound. You said she didn't want to go. You told me she wasn't clever enough for university. It's out of context. Father sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked around the table, seeking an ally, but finding only shocked stares. Mother, please, the girl is mentally unstable. She doctored the tape. It's technology. Deepfakes. You know how these things work. I have the emails too. He sighed, turning the page of the binder. But the worst part isn't what they did to me. It's what they did to you, grandmother. He flipped to the back of the binder, where the spreadsheets were. He had spent nights compiling these, cross-referencing bank statements he had pulled from father's unlocked office with the checks grandmother had written. The roof repair last spring, he pointed to a line item. There was no more leak. The $30,000 went to pay off Ben's gambling debt. Shut up, Ben screamed, lunging across the table to grab the binder. He pulled it back sharply. The medical specialist for mother's migraines. He continued, my voice rising over Ben's shouting. That was the down payment on the Porsche. The one they told you was a lease. He looked directly at grandmother. Her eyes were wet, tears pulling in the wrinkles of her lower lids. She looked small, diminished by the weight of the betrayal. They have stolen nearly $200,000 from you in the last 2 years alone, he sighed, the finality of the number hanging in the air. All while telling you that it was the burden, that it was the drain on the family finances. Liar, mother shrieked, finally finding her voice. She stood up, knocking her chair over with a crash. After everything we've done for you, we put a roof over your head, we fed you. I cooked the food. I yelled back, my composure cracking just enough to let the fire through. I cleaned the roof. I paid the bills. I raised your children because you were too busy posing for pictures. I took a deep breath, the scent of the roast lamb now nauseating to me. I looked around the table at my aunts, uncles, and the cousins. They were staring at me with a mixture of eye and fear, as if seeing me for the first time. The invisible servant had become a giant. I have been accepted to the university, he sighed, addressing the room but focusing on grandmother. On a full academic scholarship. They tried to stop me because they need a servant. They tried to stop me because they are drowning in debt and lies. And I am the only one keeping them afloat. He closed the binder. The snap of the rings was the final punctuation mark. I am not a mule, he sighed, looking my father in the eye. He was purple with rage, veins bulging in his neck, but he didn't dare move toward me again, not with the eyes of the entire extended family fixed on him. And I am done pulling the cart. The room remained suspended in a terrible, electric tension. The only sound was the jagged breathing of my mother and the soft, rhythmic tapping of grandmother Eleanor's fingernail on the mahogany table. A slow, deliberate beat that signaled a judgment was forming. She slowly put on her reading glasses, picked up the transcripts, and began to read, ignoring the desperate, stammering pleas that began to spill from my father's lips. The silence that followed the final audio clip was heavy, a physical weight pressing down on the mahogany dining table. The recorder sat in the center, a small black plastic judge, jury, and the executioner. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic but trapped in a cane, but my hands, resting on the white tablecloth, were perfectly still. For a moment, the only sound in grandmother's palatial dining room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the ragged, shallow breathing of my mother. She stared at the device as if it were a venomous snake that had just bitten her. Grandmother Rose sat at the head of the table. Her spine was still, her silver hair carved into an immaculate bun, her eyes obscured behind the glare of her spectacles. She had not moved a muscle since she laid out the spreadsheets detailing the tuition payments that had actually gone to cover gambling debts and the medical expenses that were essentially Anya's designer wardrobe fund. Major, my father croaked, his voice cracking. He loosened his silk tie, sweat beading on his forehead despite the aggressively air-conditioned chill of the room. You have to understand. Context. Ava's. She's been unwell. She's confused. These recordings are taken out of quiet. Grandmother sighed. It wasn't a shout. It was a whisper that carried the force of our gavel strike. She slowly turned her gaze from the damning papers to her son. Unwell, the only sickness you see here, David, is a rat. A rat that has infested his family, while he poured money into it, believing he was nurturing success. It's a misunderstanding. Anya shrieked, her face blotchy. She looked from me to grandmother, her usual mask of superiority crumbling into a panic of a spoiled child told no for the first time. Ava is jealous. She has always been jealous because she is a loser who sits in her room while Ben and he actually lives funded by my estate. Grandmother corrected, her voice icy. Based on grades that, according to these transcripts Ava retrieved from the school server, are entirely fabricated. You are failing 3 classes, Anya. Andy Ben. She picked up a sheet of paper, squinting at it. Ben hasn't attended a lecture in 6 weeks. Ben slumped in his chair, refusing to meet anyone's eyes, picking at the cuticle of his thumb until it bled. Grandmother stood up. The scraping of her chair against the parquet floor was violent, jarring. She walked over to where he sat. He flinched instinctively, a reflex born of fears of dodging my mother's backhanded slaps or my father's thrown books. But grandmother simply placed a hand on my shoulder. It was warm, firm, and trembling slightly with suppressed rage. You have been blind, she announced to the room, though she was looking down at me. He assumed that because he provided, you would parent. He assumed that because he gave, you would be grateful. Instead, you have treated your youngest child like an indentured servant to facilitate your own sloth. She likes helping, my mother insisted, standing up now, her hands grasping at the air as if trying to catch the narrative slipping away from her. We are a team, Rose. We all pitch in. Ava handles the house because she's good at it. We were preparing her for domestic life. It's discipline. It is exploitation, grandmother snapped, finally raising her voice. The thunder of it made the crystal glasses rattle. And the ends. Now, she looked at my father, her eyes hard as flint. David, as of this moment, the trust disbursements are frozen. The allowance for the mortgage is cancelled. The tuition payments for Anya and Ben, which he now know are never going to tuition, are terminated. The color drained from my father's face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. Mother, you can't. The house, the club memberships. We have lines of credit based on your support. We'll be ruined. We'll be on the street. Then perhaps you should learn to scrub floors, grandmother sighed, her tone dripping with disdain. Here Ava is an excellent teacher. She turned her back on them, looking down at me. The hardness in her eyes melted, replaced by a profound, sorrowful softness. Ava, child, I cannot apologize enough for my ignorance. I let my distance become your prison. I found my voice, surprisingly steady. You didn't know, grandmother. They made sure you didn't. I know now, she sighed. And I know about the scholarship, the University of Edinburgh. I nodded. Full ride, tuition and the board. But you'll need more than that, she sighed, her voice strengthening. You need freedom. You need to not worry about a single penny while you study. It will cover your living expenses, your travel, your books, and anything else you require. You will go, you will study, and you will never wash another dish for these people again. My mother let out a wail, a theatrical, desperate sound. You're stealing her from US. She's our daughter. Ava, tell her you can leave US. Who will manage the accounts? Who will cook for your brother? He has allergies. He stood up. My legs felt light and burdened. I looked across the table at the people who shared my DNA. I saw the panic in their eyes, not because they loved me and they were losing me, but because the engine of their comfort was walking out the door. Ben is 20 years old, mother, I sighed quietly. He can learn to eat a label. I turned to my grandmother. Thank you, I accept. Kid, she sighed. My driver is outside. Go to your house, pack only what you need. Do not stay a second longer than necessary. You will stay at the hotel with me tonight, and we will sort out your visa and the flights in the morning. He didn't wait for permission to leave the table. He walked toward the archway leading to the foyer. Ava, my father's voice was a roar, a command that used to freeze my blood. If you were out that door, don't you dare think of coming back. You are ungrateful. Ratchet stopped and he turned back, holding the door from her. The fear was gone. In its place was a vast, cool emptiness. You know, he sighed, you've told me that my whole life. But strangely, it don't feel ungrateful. It just feel done. He walked out of the dining room, the sound of their shouting erupting behind me like a chaotic symphony no more longer had taken that. The drive to the university campus in Edinburgh 6 months later felt like driving through a painting. The taxi wound through cobbled streets, past ancient stone buildings that seemed to hold the secrets of centuries. It was raining a grey, insistent drizzle, but to me, it felt like a baptism. My dorm room was small, smelling faintly of lemon polish and the old paper. It was stark, utilitarian, and utterly beautiful. It had a desk, a bed, a window overlooking a courtyard, and the door that locked. The first night, I lay awake, waiting. My body was conditioned to listen for the heavy tread of my father's footsteps, the shrill call of my mother demanding tea, or as if something Ben had broken and he needed me to fix. But so was only the wind rattling the pane and the distant sound of laughter from the hallway. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. So were 12 missed calls from a number he had blocked, and the 3 voicemails in the blocked messages folder. He didn't listen to them. He selected delete all with a thumb that didn't shake. The transition wasn't seamless. The trauma of 20 years doesn't vanish with a plane ticket. For the first few weeks, he apologized profusely to everyone. If a roommate dropped a spoon, he flinched. If a professor asked a question, he assumed he was in trouble. One afternoon, in the university library, he was surrounded by stacks of books on economic theory. The sunlight slanted through the high Gothic windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He was working on an essay, my mind sharp and engaged, devouring the information. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grandmother Rose. Your father called the lawyers again. He is trying to sue for grandparent alienation. It was thrown out in 5 minutes. He also asked for a loan to pay the electric bill. I sent him a link to a job application for a warehouse. Keep studying, my dear. I am so proud of you. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, a genuine, unbidden sound that startled a student at the next table. I covered my mouth, smiling. Sorry, he whispered. No more worries, Tageru whispered back, smiling. Can yours? To best, he sighed. He looked back down at my work. The words on the page blurred for a second as tears pricked my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of relief so profound it felt like vertigo. He thought about the house he had left behind. By now, the lawn would be overgrown. The silver would be tarnished. The facade they had so desperately polished was undoubtedly cracking, exposing the raw underneath to the neighborhood they tried so hard to impress. They were drowning in the mess they had created. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't a life raft. He picked up my pen. The ink flowed smoothly onto the paper, writing a future that belonged solely to me. He was alone in a foreign country thousands of miles from the place you'd to call home, but as you look around the library at the rows of books, the quiet determination of other students, the best open potential of the world, he realized something. He wasn't Cinderella anymore. He never needed the prince or the glass slipper. He just needed to take off the apron and he walked out the door. He turned the page, and he began to write chapter 1 of my own life.